Welcome back everyone, it's Charlie. This is going to be my Star Trek Picard Episode 1 video. Hopefully you've had a chance to see the episode. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the Easter egg videos. There were a whole bunch of callbacks and references to the other Star Trek series, most notably Star Trek The Next Generation and the Next Generation movies, so we'll break all that down as I go through my top 10 WTF, but careful for spoilers if you have not seen the episode yet, obviously. Starting with number 10 though. Welcome back Picard and Data. So they start on 10 forward on the Enterprise. You're in the future, but you're basically inside Picard's mind space. He's having a nightmare about what happened to Mars that they talk about later in the episode. There was a big question about why he would ever leave Starfleet, so I'll address that in my list here because it's a pretty big WTF moment. But this is all taking place about 20 years after the end of Star Trek Nemesis. Don't worry, you don't have to rewatch that movie. They also sort of retcon some of the elements of the ending of Star Trek Nemesis, so if you hated that movie, they're actually kind of wiping it a little bit from the timeline, just a little bit. Although technically those events still did happen, like Data did die at the end of Star Trek Nemesis. They're playing poker just like they did during Star Trek Next Generation, Data trying to bluff him. They have a couple jokes about Data being bad at trying to bluff. Then Picard gets a bit of a call to action. There are a couple lines of dialogue that give him calls to action throughout the episode, but it's not till way later at the end of the episode before he gets the literal wake-up call that calls him to action to help find out what happened to quote-unquote the girl. He wakes up from his nightmare. We find that he's been living on his family's vineyard in France, Chateau Picard. You see Chateau Picard show up all over the place. They're even drinking wine in the big scene after this too. But he has a dog. He's named Number 1, which is a Riker reference. Riker comes back, I think, in the next episode. In 7 of 9, there are a bunch of familiar characters from the other Star Trek series that are showing up. Number 9 WTF, the activation. So you go to Boston, you meet the new main character, or one half of the main character because she's a twin that we learned later in the episode. They reference the Daystrom Institute. She's a specialist in artificial intelligence and quantum consciousness. That should be the dead giveaway. That's like saying that she's an expert in data, basically. So that should have been a bit of a lead-off that she's connected to Data somehow. We learned that it's a Romulan strike team that's after her, so they crash in, they kill him, and try to take her before she can quote-unquote activate. Then we find out what that means when they put the bag over her head, and she just goes into action, just wasting all of them in no time at all. She still doesn't understand what's going on. She's flesh and blood like a human would be, but she has this weird vision of Picard, so she eventually starts to track him down. Then number 8, the brand new intro sequence. So you notice that there's no intro narration from Picard like they did during Star Trek Next Generation. I was a little bummed out by that, but I guess that's what they're doing with all the new Trek shows. No opening narration. It starts with a shard of glass cracking away from the sky, like the reality is cracking, or it's fake, it's a holodeck projection, and we follow the shard as it falls through layers of reality or layers of memory because we're talking about spinning out a new consciousness and rebuilding Data's neural net. It starts with Picard's vineyard because he's the main character of the series. Then as it travels through that layer of reality, you start to see these little like memory engrams as it travels through the Borg cube. We see that later in the episode because that's where her twin is working. It's the Borg cube that the Federation in the galaxy has co-opted to use for the Romulan people. This pattern evolving here is what's talked about later when they're at the Daystrom Institute. Alison Pill's character basically explains that they can rebuild Data, so to speak, or rebuild his technology using a single neuron. That's basically what you're watching here, the process of that happening. It evolves, but it turns into Picard just because he's the main character of the series. But we're also probably witnessing the act of creation of the twin girls, too, when they were first created, which they do explain during the episode. They play a couple notes from the Star Trek Next Generation theme song at the end of this, but it is a brand new song for the most part. Then number 7, the backstory and the crossover moments with the 2009 Star Trek movie from the Kelvin timeline. So the big thing here you probably notice is that they're connecting this to the J.J. Abrams new Star Trek movies through the really big act that destroys Romulus, the big supernova. If you're confused about what Picard did that forced him or made him want to leave Starfleet, he was actually trying to help save the Romulan people, but at some point during that process, the Federation decided that they didn't want to help the Romulans because they've been their enemies for so long. Picard revolted. He refused to leave the area without rescuing the Romulans, so that was already a big act of insubordination against Starfleet. But while that was going on, they say that a rogue group of synthetics took advantage of the chaos and wiped out the Utopia Planitia shipyards near Mars, killing about 90,000 people. Because of that catastrophe, there was a Federation and a galaxy-wide ban on synthetics. So right now, the Romulans aren't the most hated people in the galaxy. It's actually synthetic people, which kind of makes this new girl character, or the surviving twin, a Baby Yoda, so to speak. So they're kind of going for a Baby Yoda vibe. She has to be protected because everyone wants a piece of her, either to kill her like the Romulans, or to exploit her like some of the researchers probably want to do. So after all that happens, Picard is just really upset with the decisions the Federation is making. He decides to resign his commission and goes to live on his vineyard. Then number 6, a little while goes by, the girl finds Picard. He's not totally sure what's going on, but she seems kind of familiar to him. She thinks that she knows him, but she doesn't know how, just because it seems like all of her programming is subconscious and it requires really heightened stress levels to activate it. Later, Picard has a dream where he sees Data underneath a tree in his classic next-gen uniform, Picard himself in his classic next-gen uniform. He's painting the picture of the girl that's hanging in his study and later in the archives of the girl herself. Data asks if he wishes to finish it. This is another one of those call to actions. Picard's like, I don't know how. And Data says, no, that's not true. You totally know how to do this. It's basically Picard telling himself that he does have the ability to take this mission on and save this girl. So number 5, WTF, the big one. Picard discovers the girl's true identity is Data's daughter, in effect. Obviously not biological daughter, but the way she's created from one of Data's neurons, so she is in effect Data's daughter. There's all kinds of Easter eggs when he goes into the archives. They have a funny joke about the hologram, trying to tell a joke. We're trying something new. Don't quit your J job. There's a model of the Enterprise E from the Next Gen movies. This was last seen during Star Trek Nemesis. Don't worry, we don't have to speak of that movie ever again. There's some of his books, his commendations, things that were hanging inside his ready room. There's one of Worf's Batless. They even put the banner from the Picard Day episode in there too, and it's all signed by the kids that he had the adventure with during that episode. They made very clear to show you the names of those little kids, just referencing the events of that episode. He pulls the painting out, and it's not really clear why this is the original or if the other one's a copy or what's going on, till the really advanced version of Alexa tells him, no, this was given to you as painted by Commander Data over 30 years ago. The painting's title was Daughter. Later, when the girl flees into the street and calls her mother, worried about what to do, and she tells her about Picard, wait a minute, I didn't mention Picard, it's pretty clear that the mother is connected to the Maddox figure from the Daystrom Institute and knows exactly what's going on. Go find Picard, he'll take care of you. So keep in mind that none of these people, her mother, her father that she keeps referring to, and her sister also refers to, our father made these necklaces for us. Those aren't their biological parents. Obviously, she has no biological parents, or if you want to think about it that way, Data would be her biological father. She tracks Picard down at Starfleet headquarters. How did you find me here? You're not even supposed to be able to track me without a security clearance, which you definitely don't have. So she comes to the realization of who she really is, then completely hulks out on the Romulan assassins. It's a really good action scene, pretty good fight scene, but even though I knew that this actress was going to be a main character this season, I wasn't totally sure how they were going to explain her coming back by the end of the episode. I totally was not expecting her to be a twin, so that's the way they're keeping the character around on the show. Although, you know, talk about twins, Data's twin brother Lore, it's 2 twin girls, so instead of Data and Lore, it's now these 2 twin sisters, except one of them just died. It's not totally clear why the Romulan assassins want her dead. They think that she's going to do something terrible, presumably, but you do notice that when she gets some of their green blood on her, it's corrosive, it starts burning through her like acid, she screams in pain. So one of the big differences in the fact that she's a flesh and blood android is that she can feel pain, whereas Data could not. But if it wasn't clear, based on the ending of the episode and what happens after this, I'm pretty sure that she died in this explosion. So she's not around, but her twin sister is still alive. Number 3, WTF. He goes to the Daystrom Institute and finds out the truth about Data's twin daughters, where they came from, and how they were created. Alison Pill's character is also a main character on the show, so she'll be traveling around with Picard in later episodes. Her name is Dr. Jurati. She explains that her partner basically created the twin girls based on a fractal cloning idea. Like, oh, you can take one little neuron and clone the original creation, but it winds up turning into his daughters, and they're always created in pairs, twins, just like Data and Lore. We haven't met the Maddox figure. I'm assuming he'll show up later in the series, but her former partner that went into hiding and then created the twins is basically the person that the girls keep referring to as their father. Really fun callback to a really bad movie when they reference Star Trek Nemesis by yoinking out B4 from storage. The big retcon to that, though, is that that didn't work. They say all that stuff was lost, all of Data's memories, and he wound up being this inferior version of Data. So this is them saying that they're not going to be pursuing B4 as the future of the Data character. It's going to be through his daughters. Number 2, this is actually a really cool reveal. The Romulan Reclamation Site, the place where they took the Romulan people after they saved them, there were about 900 million plus Romulans that they saved from destruction, are all living on a giant Borg cube. I love the visual way they reveal this too. Like, first you just think it's a really big space station. Oh wow, this seems kind of ominous, but you know, pretty cool. Love big space stations. But as it slowly pans out at the end of the episode, you find out what's really going on. Wait a minute, where did this Borg cube come from? Is it somehow the spoils of war? How are they using it without the Borg technology overrunning them? What's going on with all the Borg nanites? There are some Borg that are working within Starfleet, or at least friendly to Starfleet, like 7 of 9 doesn't look like she's Starfleet anymore, but she's one of the main characters on the series. But Hugh from Star Trek The Next Generation, the other Borg character, is back. So maybe he and other Borg like him that have turned good are trying to help the Federation use this Borg technology. Then number 1 WTF, we get the big reveal of the twin, and we find out she's just called Dr. Soji. She's working there as a medical doctor. The person that comes to talk to her, Narek, just seems like he's a Vulcan, because Narek seems like a Vulcan name. It's kind of hard to tell Romulans from Vulcans unless you know what their name is or know how they act. It felt like a pretty strong premiere, at least the premise. I'm really interested to see where they take the series, so let me know what you guys thought of it, if you spotted any big Easter eggs that I didn't mention in the video. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to see how this video performs. If enough people like the series and watch this video, I'll keep doing episode videos, but otherwise I'll at least do a wrap-up video when it's all done. There'll be 10 episodes total. Everyone click here for my brand new Avengers Evil Captain America teaser video, and click here for my new Star Wars Clone Wars Season 7 trailer with Baby Yoda and Mandalorian Easter eggs. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I have spoken.